In today's gospel story, we hear the third appearance of Jesus after his resurrection to his disciples, to Peter and to those who were gathered with him. And we hear today really four parts of a story, right? We hear the first part of the story that is the miraculous catch of fish, which should hearken back to the memory of when Jesus first called the disciples, and he said, "I will make you fishers of men." Then we hear about the meal. And the meal should remind us of the 5 loaves and 2 fish that the boy brought forward, that Jesus did a Eucharistic miracle in a sense. So it's a meal shared by the disciples. Then we get to that great part of the story that is Peter's restoration. So Peter is restored into his leadership and relationship with Jesus Christ through the threefold question, "Do you love me?" Right? Jesus could have focused on a lot of other things. He could have focused on guilt or shame or betrayal. But instead, he builds relationship with Peter. He restores relationship with Peter through those questions of love and the response of love. The 3 times Peter denied Jesus and the 3 times he is asked, "Do you love me?" really are connected. And they are connected by one small detail, and that detail is that it's the only place in all the Gospels where there's the mention of a charcoal fire. So there's a fire that Peter's warming himself at when he denies Jesus, and there's a charcoal fire on the shore when he is restored in relationship with Jesus. And then through that, we have a commissioning of Peter to feed my lambs, feed my sheep, tend my sheep, and a sort of mission towards giving his life in martyrdom, giving his life for the good of the church and the spread of the gospel. So those are the 4 parts that we hear about, but it is a resurrection appearance of Jesus. And so Jesus is alive. Jesus has been raised from the dead. The tomb is empty. He has conquered sin. He has conquered death. He is risen. Alleluia. So he is risen, right? He is risen, and that is an invitation to us. It's not just a historical event that we recall. It's an invitation today to each of us to respond to the resurrection. How do we respond to the living Jesus Christ, that he is alive? And so I want to focus on one part of the 4 stories that we hear in today's gospel, which is Peter's response when John tells him that it is the Lord that's on the shore. So John is the one who recognizes that it's Jesus after they have the miraculous catch of fish. And Peter, when he hears that it is Jesus, what does he do? He tucks in his garments, for he's lightly clad, and he jumps into the sea to go swim to Jesus, right? He dives in completely. Since we're celebrating baptism today, we always remember, or we recognize that in almost every case in the scriptures, when water is mentioned, it's a sense of our own baptism. And so there's a connection here for Peter's own mission and ministry that's related to his baptism. So he jumps into the sea, but he doesn't do that half-heartedly. You don't jump or dive in only like 10%, or just wait and kind of calculate and figure out, well, how cold's the water? I'm going to put my toe in, right? He just jumps in. He dives in. And so the invitation of the resurrection into relationship with the living Jesus Christ, the response that we can have is one of diving in, right? Totally immersing ourselves in that relationship with Jesus. Many of you know that I went to basic training at the Air Force Academy, and so that was many years ago now. And I went to Colorado Springs a couple of days early, and I stayed with my dad. And then when the day came to be dropped off, Dad drove me up to the academy, and we stopped at an intersection, very unceremonially. Stopped at an intersection, a stop sign, and I got out of the car, and I was immediately surrounded by 3 upperclassmen that started yelling at me and told me to run over here, and then I learned a whole new way of how to stand, and then later that day I got a new haircut, I got new clothes, everything changed. My reality was different, and I began to realize I might have gotten into something I didn't expect. But there was a total and encompassing entrance into something new. I'd like to suggest that Peter's response, his diving into the water, was already an act of love on his part. So often intellectually, we calculate and tabulate and try to figure out and hesitate and hem in, but the heart, when moved by love, is creative. The heart, when moved by love, tries new things, enters into new realities, right? So Peter's response, diving in, already expressed what he later expressed verbally, that yes, Lord, you know that I love you. It is something new. And our heart experience of diving into relationship with Jesus, of responding to his love, to the risen Christ, is something that moves us into a new reality, right? It is how we break out of our comfort zones, our patterns of behavior, our patterns of thinking. All of that is because we dive in to that intimacy and relationship with Jesus Christ. And so when we do that, in the invitation here, there are a couple of aspects of how we can dive into that relationship. The first, I would say, is diving into trust, right? Letting go, trusting in Jesus. When we come to the Eucharist every week, whenever we come, that we are invited into that relationship of trust, that we are offering ourselves to God, allowing his will to be done in our lives, trusting that he's with us always and that he guides us and protects us and provides for us. And so the Eucharist each week is an opportunity to dive into trust. We should also be able to dive into mercy. We dive into mercy most clearly through the sacrament of reconciliation. So when we go to that sacrament, right, it is not just that the guilt is rising and the shame is rising and Jesus offers us absolution, which is true. But like in his encounter with Peter today, it is a moment when not only are we saying, Jesus, I trust in you, but it is a moment that Jesus is saying, I trust in you. He is renewing his covenant with us. He renews his relationship with Peter through Peter's profession of love. And then he sends him. And so the third thing is that we can dive into mission, that we are not called for ourselves, right? We don't enter into the relationship with Jesus just isolated or alone or individually. We do that as a community, and we do that in service to others. And so Peter is sent out to feed my sheep, and he is sent out to give his life for the good of others and in proclamation of the gospel. In fact, you can hear in how much of a change that was in Peter, because you can hear in the Acts of the Apostles today, we must obey God rather than men. That's the same guy that said, I don't even know him, right? It is a transformation because of that diving into the relationship with love. So as we gather here today, we are coming to a point where we can dive into trust, dive into mercy, and that we can dive into mission. Today, in each of our lives, Jesus stands on the shore, our shore, your shore, right? Jesus stands on the shore and he calls to you this morning. What will your response be?